Coming to you live from the planet of Coruscant. It's the Hand Plus podcast brought to you by Movie Changeup, where each week I, Joseph Ricky, and my co-host Tristan Mayer break down this week in streaming. We talk about everything going on your favorite streaming services, from HBO Max, Amazon Prime, Netflix, Disney Plus, and all your other favorite streaming services. So if you have a streaming service, especially now with House of the Dragon down, Andor's only got a few weeks left. Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power's over, I believe. And you're like, I have all these streaming services. What should I be watching? What do I need to be watching? What do I need to catch up on? What have I missed? What's coming up? That's what we're here to do. So basically, this is kind of our end of the month, beginning of the month, which is kind of for us as far as pre-production, our busiest time, because we're figuring out, hey, what was some of our favorite things from the last month, and also what's some of the biggest things coming up in November. So we're going to be catching you up on what you missed in October, as well as counting down, ending our show with a countdown of our top 10 most anticipated of November. We kind of took last week off. We had some things going on in both of our lives, but we ended up doing a House of the Dragon preview, or wrap-up, a few days ago. It's kind of our consolation episode. So, hey, we couldn't put out a full episode, but we did put out a House of the Dragon wrap-up. If you're a House of the Dragon fan and you want to hear our thoughts, go check that out. That's already up. That's already released. You can go ahead and watch that. And I'll just ask Tristan the question I ask him every week. Tristan, what were your thoughts on, I guess, the last 2 weeks of streaming?
Yeah, like you said, it's a busy time because we're not only ending a month, we're beginning one, but not just ending a month, but ending a theme month too. So I was really, really busy on my horror movie watching over the last couple of weeks. So I'm not going to lie, I came into November a bit relieved. You know, I took a little bit of a breath, especially when we went through that list and I saw it was coming up, and there's some good stuff, but there's not like a huge long series I gotta watch now, anything like that. So I'm looking forward to a little bit of a breather for November as we get out of October. So I'm looking forward to some of what we're watching, but I'm also glad that maybe we'll be able to have our ear to the ground and pick up some new exciting show. You know, there's been stuff we've missed, like Heartstopper and things like that. I'm hopeful that we can pick that up this month and grab onto some new stuff.
All right, definitely. And so one of the things I did is, normally, hey, if you haven't caught on by now, the name of our podcast, The Hand Plus, came from an acronym of kind of the four major streaming services. Originally, it did stand for HBO Max, Amazon Prime, Netflix, and Disney Plus. And then right before we started doing the podcast, there was the whole Discovery merger, and is HBO Max even going to be a thing? So I took out HBO Max, substituted in Hulu. And then over time, I kind of realized that, hey, not much going on Hulu. Basically, their best stuff is pretty much the stuff they work with FX on. And they'll occasionally have a decent movie or something. But it seemed like every week HBO Max was having multiple quality things that we wanted to talk about. So it made sense to replace HBO Max as far as the H in hand. However, if there is a big Hulu drop, we will be talking about that as well, but we may not focus on Hulu as much as we have in the past, because we didn't really focus on it to begin with, because, to be honest, they don't really have much outside of, like I said, the stuff they work with other brands. There's nothing exactly that's a specific Hulu drop. You can only get it on Hulu. And with that, we'll talk about a movie that came out earlier this year in theaters, and now I believe it is on HBO Max, according to Tristan, and that's Barbarian.
Yeah, Barbarian, if you're looking for a horror movie to watch on Halloween, just barely squeezed it in at the end of last month. That was like October 25th to 26th that added on to HBO Max, and this is definitely a horror movie to recommend. If you're a fan of movies that, you know, take some kind of genre tonal shift turns and things you don't really expect to happen, it doesn't necessarily pull big plot twists, but it does kind of pull like turns of events and tonal shifts and things like that are really exciting. If you know stuff like Malignant, it was compared a lot to Malignant, with the way Malignant takes kind of like big genre turns in horror. That's similar to this, but the beginning premise is that this woman shows up in the middle of the night in a rundown Detroit neighborhood at her Airbnb, and it's 2 a.m, raining, middle of the night. She knocks on the door and answers Bill Skarsgård, and they're really confused because he says, I reserved this on HomeAway and she reserved it on Airbnb, and they say, oh, well, let's make a night of it, so you stay on the couch and I'll stay in the bedroom and we'll just figure it out in the morning. And lo and behold, the night does not go as easily as they think it will. And there's maybe something going on in the house. Maybe she's just paranoid of this guy and his uh, his kind of awkwardness and his demeanor around her. He's clearly, attracted to her, and she's wondering, oh, is he just weird because he's attracted to me, or is it something else? And you're following her as she figures out that puzzle. I definitely recommend it if you're a fan of horrors and thrillers and stuff that keeps you guessing as you're going along. And also, it's also very tight and well shot, so you're not, it's just kind of like set within this house and within a couple of tight locations around the house, so you're not getting this big sprawling narrative. So it's a really interesting tight thriller that I highly recommend for people who are into horror and into big kind of genre shifts and tonal shifts around the movie.
All right, yeah, it was definitely one I wanted to check out. I didn't get around to it. I really liked *Malignant* when that came out last year, so now that it's on HBO Max, I'm definitely going to be checking it out. And to kind of quickly go through with our HBO Max discussion, like I said, normally we would be talking about, hey, this is the finale of House of the Dragon. Tristan, what were your thoughts? Blah blah blah. But we did a whole entire show dedicated to the first season of House of the Dragon. So if you're curious about our House of the Dragon thoughts, like I said, go check out that episode. And with that, I believe it kind of moves us on to Amazon Prime. And Tristan, I believe there's some news that dropped that if you got Amazon Prime, you may be very much interested in. Correct me if I'm wrong, but basically every song ever recorded, I imagine you just get for free if you have Amazon Music. They said we have, 100 million songs ad free, listen to whenever you want. So Jeff Bezos said, "Hey, I know I got more money than I know what to do with. Here's, I'll throw you a little bone. Free music forever. Have fun, as long as you have Amazon Prime."
Amazon did have their own standalone Amazon Music service that they were charging people per month. So I'm assuming that this means that is pretty much gone, or it's becoming part of Prime in a way somehow or another. And yeah, this is a really exciting move. It's not necessarily related to us in the streaming video way, but streaming music is also a really, really huge form of entertainment. I know I listen to a lot of stuff on Spotify, so if Amazon's able to pull this off and give us a really good Amazon app out of it, maybe combine it with Audible so you can get your podcasts and your audiobooks and the music and your Prime Video all kind of in one place, I could see them, being a Spotify killer in some ways. They didn't have everything on Amazon Music that I was looking for, but they had practically everything, and it sounds like they've gotten more and more and more since I've used it. So yeah, I can't wait to check out what they got on here and see if I can cancel my Spotify and save myself, $10 a month to just put it all in one app here.
Yeah. But hopefully they have Taylor Swift, because apparently she's the biggest act ever in music. All top 10 of the Billboard Hot 100 are Taylor Swift songs right now off her new album. So
I reserved my tickets this morning, Joe. So
nice.
I'll see you there.
All right, and another thing you watched on Amazon Prime this week, Days of Heaven. What were your thoughts on that? Who should be watching Days of Heaven?
Days of Heaven. If you are a Criterion fan or a fan of bougie Blu-ray purchases, you know that November is the month that Barnes & Noble and Criterion put all of their movies on half price. So I use this as a time to watch all the Criterion movies that I haven't had a chance to watch yet, and one of them was Days of Heaven. If you're a fan of Terrence Malick, this is one of his earliest movies. It's not his first movie, but I think it's definitely where I'd recommend people to start if you're kind of curious and you don't want to get into like the big, long, not like poetic kind of stuff that you hear about.
Tree of Life. That's where you should start.
Definitely don't start with Tree of Life. Start with Days of Heaven. This is very short. It's like 90 minutes, and you have, I think, Richard Gere is your lead. So you have kind of a young Richard Gere breaking into his acting career here in 1978, and it follows him and his wife and this young girl that they take in, and he commits an act of violence and murder and his workplace and has to go on the run, and it kind of follows this couple on the run as they're living at this kind of farm, working as farmhands. It's very, very gorgeous. They shot the entire movie at golden hour, that peak time between sunset and the end of the day. So everything has that crisp golden shine to it, and just gorgeous to look at. If you're a fan of Power of the Dog, Netflix's big hit from last year, this felt like it was very much influenced on that movie. It's like that tight kind of power dynamic drama set on this one farm about like who has control over the relationships and who has the power over the farm, and it's also gorgeously, impeccably beautiful. So I highly, highly recommend checking this one out. And I have it on Criterion, of course, but yeah, it's on streaming, so watch it on streaming. It'll still look great.
All right, so two things I want to say. If you watch us live on Twitch, you can feel free to comment, and we may talk about your comment in the show. And this is important because it's about Days of Heaven. Manny underscore movies 98 says he loves Days of Heaven, and he's devastated the Criterion is out of print. So if you want to watch this movie, your only shot maybe to watch it on Amazon Prime. So shout out Manny underscore movies 98 for letting us know.
Thanks, Manny. I'm glad I purchased it half price.
All right, and that brings us, I believe, to our next discussion, which is Netflix. First thing I want to talk about, Love is Blind. Solid season so far. If you haven't watched the show, don't know what it is. I think I've talked about it a little bit before on our podcast, but basically a number of singles, all that live in the same city. They've done, the first season was Atlanta. I believe second season was Chicago, and now they're in Austin. And essentially you have same amount of men and women, and all the men live in one spot for 10 days and the women live in another spot, and the only way for the men and women to interact is one-on-one in these pods, and they kind of go on. It starts off with a speed dating thing, and as they get to know each other and pick who they like and don't like, they start to spend more and more time with the people they like, and to the point that they're having 4 or 5 hour conversations, and it ultimately ends with a proposal. Usually around 6 to 8 couples propose at the end of the 10 days, all without ever seeing each other. First time they see each other, they're already engaged. And then from there, they spend a long weekend with all of the couples in this villa type scenario. And then they spend about another month living together. And ultimately, at the end, they decide if they want to get married or break up. And it's pretty solid season so far. I think season 1, it's going to be hard to top that. That was such a perfect season, especially for this concept of a show. But if you're a fan of Love is Blind, or if you haven't checked it out, I think definitely start with season 1. And if you love season 1, keep watching the rest. And if you watch season 1 and you're like, this is not for me, I don't really think season 2 or 3 is going to capture your attention.
Yeah, you talked about that show a lot, and I'm glad you're liking it. Since I know you have your big love for reality TV, and I'm glad you're here to cover that, because it's not something I'll be watching, but I do have some reality TV to talk about later, so I'm excited to talk about that.
Yeah, so moving forward, Love is Blind, I think ultimately, unless a season comes out and it's better than season 1, I'm probably not going to feel much of a need to talk about it, other than just to remind people that the new season's coming out. I'm probably not going to do weekly wrap-ups or anything like that, unless we're having a super slow week. Also, another reality show I want to talk about, we had The Mole. I don't know what season they're actually calling this, because it hasn't been on for like 15 years. It was on, I think, ABC for a season, then like Fox for a season, but this is the first season in a long, long time. And I thought it was really good. I think it's on par, if not better, than previous iterations of The Mole. I like the challenges better. I think by the end it was pretty obvious to tell who the mole was, but I thought it was a really great season. It's very much not a trashy type show. It's much more in the line of like a Survivor or Amazing Race, where it's about the people and it's not so much about manufactured drama or watching trashy people fight. It's very much, if you like puzzles and mind games and watching personalities interact with each other, I definitely think it's more for more for the people that like to watch, like I said, Survivor, Amazing Race, Big Brother, and less people that like to watch like Real Housewives of Atlanta or Married to Medicine or any of those type of shows.
Yeah, this sounds much more up my alley of something that I'd actually enjoy watching. I definitely like the competition kind of reality shows, and I've watched Bachelorette. I'm going to talk later in the Prime section briefly about a reality show I started watching on there that I'm going to pitch to you and see if you might catch up with me and give your thoughts next week episode. But yeah, we'll see how it goes.
Did you say what show it was?
I watched Dragula on Prime. I definitely I'm going to go with you and talk about that when we get there. But
we already did talk about Prime. Did
pitch.
I miss it?
Unless I forgot to put it in the list, I can.
We can circle back to it.
We'll circle back to it.
We got one more Netflix.
That's our style.
Yeah, we got one more Netflix thing to talk about, and we can circle back to Amazon Prime.
Works for me.
All right, and the next thing to talk about is the show you watched, and that is Guillermo del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities.
Yeah, this is really, really great. If you don't know, this is Guillermo del Toro's anthology horror series. He serves as like a host similar to the Twilight Zone in a way where he introduces the segments, or he introduces each of the episodes and kind of gives his thoughts on why he chose them, or what was so ghoulishly cool about this story in particular. Some of these episodes he writes and actually works on, but others are different people. Like David S. Goyer wrote an episode here, and you have a couple of interesting guest writers, and some adaptations by like Lovecraft stories, things like that. And yeah, it's an anthology series, so I don't expect there to be any connective tissue. But if you're a fan of, Black Mirror and The Twilight Zone and those kinds of classic horror, sci-fi adjacent anthology series, this is much more on the horror side. Like, there's not really, Twilight Zone has horror episodes here and there. Black Mirror, it definitely has horror elements to the sci-fi, but this is a horror show, and it leans into horror tropes and horror genres, and there's really, really great episodes as you go along. I don't want to spoil some of the more interesting visuals, but as you get down to later into the episodes, there's definitely some really crazy images and body horror kind of stuff. So it pushes the boundaries a bit into, crazy territory, quite a little bit more dark than you might be thinking for like, it was not going to be a kids type of show, I definitely recommend it a lot. It's not gonna be like terrifying, but they're really, really good short films essentially that you're watching each episode, and I highly recommend checking it out if you're a fan of that genre, especially if you're a fan of horror.
All right. Yeah, definitely one I've wanted to check out. I just didn't get around to it, so I'll probably be checking it out probably when my girlfriend is not home and I have free time.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I will say, our viewer Manny, who wrote in earlier, said he liked the episodes The Viewing and The Outside. So maybe if
The Viewing was definitely a good episode, directed by the director of Mandy, the Nick Cage movie. Yeah, had a big, huge cult following. So if you're a fan of that, that's definitely in his style. Jennifer Kent, who did The Babadook, also has an episode. So yeah, he brings in some really great guests to elevate this anthology. He's not handing it out to like B-tier TV directors. These are actual, experienced, great horror directors.
Wow. TV directors are people too, Tristan.
We get enough of TV directors on Disney movies, okay? Let's go back to some real movie directors here.
And with that, I believe we're gonna circle back to Amazon Prime. You wanted to talk about a reality show, Dragula. So let's hear about that.
We should be watching Dragula. Talk about Dragula. Who should be watching Dragula? Joe, you should be watching Dragula. I think you would have such a good time with this. I don't have any previous experience with drag. I never watched RuPaul's Drag Race or anything like that, but if you know the concept, it's people who are dressed in drag, and they're kind of competing week to week in these contests. The first episode had them doing a lip sync kind of Munster style intro, so they all had to get in these classically inspired costumes and design them themselves. One was a pumpkin, and she pulled off her head and there were like guts on the inside, and one was a mummy and she was all wrapped up in like leather that was kind of like a mummy falling apart. So the fun of it is them kind of under this time limit having to get their stuff together and make costumes that fit this theme, while also like learning the choreography, learning the lip sync, doing the challenge. There's a bunch of competition that's going on. So if you're a fan of that kind of competition side of the reality show, I think you'd like this a lot. And also if you're a fan of like the drama and the tension between contestants, this is peak tension between contestants. It's like very, very dramatic people in very, very dramatic situations, especially because this current season is a Titans season. So they brought back some of the fan favorites who didn't win previous seasons, but came pretty close. They were beloved among the fans. So you get a lot of really intense personalities, and they all have history together too, because they're kind of known among this fandom and know each other, not just among like drag, but also among Dragula specifically. So there's some great drama between the people and great competitions. It's all horror themed, so all the competitions and all the costumes and every challenge is all inspired by horror in some way or another. There's only 2 episodes out so far, but I can't wait to watch more, and I'd love to get your thoughts on it, Joe.
All right, yeah, definitely sounds up my alley as far as like reality kind of fun competition shows. Sounds a lot like some of the shows I watch. So, and that's one I can definitely get my girlfriend to watch. I think that's that's probably the hardest part of doing this show. The shows I want to watch and the movies I want to watch to review for this podcast are not anything at all what my girlfriend watches. So I
know that feeling.
It'll be probably pretty easy to get her into this. So
I can't wait to hear your thoughts, Joe. Very trashy, very fun. I loved it so far, and I can't wait to see more of it.
All right. And I think with that, it brings us pretty close to what you and I think, have been waiting to talk about for a while. We got one more topic to talk about, and then I think the thing I've been dying to talk to you about.
Give me your thoughts. I can't wait.
First one, going to Disney Plus. something you care about far more than I. There's one clip from this show I've seen 30 times and I love it. Have not watched a single episode, and that is Doctor Who. Doctor Who is coming to Disney Plus. You're a big Doctor Who fan. How do you feel about it?
I'm giddy, Joe. I can't lie. I mean, I love Doctor Who. This is a show that got me into fandom as you know, a devout follower of media. Like, this is one of those foundational shows that I watched when I was a budding fan, and it brought me into loving sci-fi, into loving camp, into enjoying the goofiness of all these kind of low budget movies I come to love in my life. So yeah, if you don't know the premise of Doctor Who, you're following this alien who is, of course, played by a human. But the gimmick of the show is that when the actor decides to leave, or the show feels like it needed a kind of a reboot or a rebrand, the Doctor can regenerate. So if the character dies, they can have their cells reform, and they pop out all of a sudden with a totally new personality, a new body, new everything, but the same memories of the person before, but they totally shifted. So the personality, the tone of the show can totally change on a whim when they feel like swapping out the lead actor. And they just recently did that a couple of weeks ago. They swapped out Jodie Whittaker, who was the first woman to play the Doctor, and they teased the newest Doctor that they said was going to be her replacement, the man from Sex Education.
Great show.
Which is a show you can watch on Netflix. He's really good in it. So if you liked him on that, hey, he's going to be in Doctor Who, Joe. That's one reason to watch it. But they tricked us, and they brought back David Tennant, a beloved actor who played the Doctor previously, and then with that announced that the show is moving to Disney Plus to be co-produced with Disney. So I think this is going to be a great era for Doctor Who. And you said I'm a huge fan, but I actually fell out of it the last couple of years, mostly because it was hard to keep track of where to watch it. Yeah. It'd be on HBO Max one month, it'd be on Amazon Prime the next month, it would be on AMC Plus the next month, and all of a sudden it would be gone. And then now the fact that it can all be on one platform, or not just one platform, but a huge platform, one that all these casual people use, families use. I think Doctor Who is going to be a huge hit among families. I think if Disney Plus really pushes this and really puts like money behind this could easily be their next huge IP that's up there among the Marvels and the Star Wars of holding Disney Plus up. I think this could be great, especially because it's not entirely in Disney's hands. It's not going to feel like the Marvel show. It's not going to feel like the Star Wars show. It's going to feel totally like its own thing. And especially if they can bring the whole backlog of all the other New Who episodes, I think they're going to have a huge IP hit, and I can't wait to see what they do with it.
Yeah, Doctor Who's always been a thing that I feel like I would like. I've just never really watched it because it always felt inaccessible. Like I never really knew where to go to watch it. And like I brought up the clip that I've seen 50 times is the one that seems to always surface on the internet. So Vincent Van Gogh is my favorite artist of all time. And there's a clip that you don't need to know anything about Doctor Who because I don't know anything about Doctor Who and I've seen the clip where Doctor Who brings Vincent Van Gogh to modern times. And if you know anything about his history, he ultimately died by suicide. And it was a whole thing. And he brings him to the Louvre, I believe. And you see, and they're walking through a whole Van Gogh exhibit. And Doctor Who walks Van Gogh up to a art curator, museum guy, played by Bill Nighy. Not Bill Nye the Science Guy, Bill Nighy, and says like, "Hey, what are your thoughts on Vincent Van Gogh?" And then Bill Nighy kind of goes into this whole thing, and it's really emotional, tear-jerking moment. Definitely, I would say even check that out, even if you're not a Doctor Who fan, because I think it's just a great, powerful moment. But when the new Doctor Who comes out, especially on Disney Plus, I feel like I'm gonna check it out. I saw you, I believe, had a tweet that posted like you felt like you had maybe a little bit of an idea of where they were going with it because when they announced the next Doctor Who, they didn't say the next Doctor Who. They said upcoming Doctor Who, and you're like, that's fishy. He's not the next one, but he's upcoming. So.
Yeah, I'm really excited because that's the appeal of it is you just watch a clip out of context and it still works. I think Doctor Who is one of those shows you can pick up an episode by itself, and because of the premise of it, he's just popping around space and time. You don't really need to have any context of what's going on to understand the episode, and you can pick up a season that you think is good. Let you know if you just watch House of the Dragon and you love Matt Smith, he has a couple season run on Doctor Who. You can just start with him, and you don't have to worry about getting the past of all the other incarnations because they give you a whole rebrand every time. So I can't wait to see it, especially because the premiere on Disney Plus is going to be the 60th anniversary special. So they're going to probably bring out the big guns, bring back some old actors, really kind of give us something special. So that'll be a great way to kick off this new era of Doctor Who.
And don't a lot of our British actors, especially actresses that we know now, started off as Doctor Who companions. So if you go back, if they put the back catalog on Doctor Who, you may recognize some faces.
Yeah, if you like any British actor and actress of any time ever in history, they're probably on an episode of Doctor Who somewhere.
Yeah. All right, and with that, I think brings at least me to the thing I've wanted to talk to you about for almost a week now. And that is season 1 of Tales of the Jedi, an animated anthology show focusing on mostly 2 characters in the Star Wars universe. This one, we had 3 episodes focusing on Ahsoka and 3 episodes focusing on Count Dooku. And first off, I would say this is definitely for experienced Star Wars fans. In no way, shape, or form would I say this is a good entry point for a new fan. I feel like you definitely have to have seen the movies and Clone Wars to have any kind of appreciation for this. I feel like if you have not seen anything Star Wars, especially if you're not even familiar, like if you've seen them, like if you saw the prequels and it was 10 years ago and you have not seen them since, I would feel like you'd still probably be lost. But I feel like for hardcore Star Wars fans, definitely worth checking out. I think they're really great. First episode, you kind of see the birth of Ahsoka and her, kind of first year of her life a little bit, going on a hunt with her mom. And the whole scenario of that where she meets a kind of tiger on her home planet. And she, uses the Force to tame the tiger, and that's when they realize she's Force sensitive. And then we get 3 Dooku episodes in a row, kind of showing his fall. And in the first 2 episodes, show why he fell, show why he chose to leave the Jedi Order. In the 3rd episode, he's already left the Jedi Order. And we're kind of getting some cool reveals in canon, kind of things I didn't know were going to be revealed in this episode, and things that now have added layers and context to the prequels when I watch them. And then the 5th episode is another Ahsoka episode. It shows kind of her training throughout the Clone Wars, kind of a little montage with a great ending that ties into the final arc of the Clone Wars. And then the final episode is basically a very much condensed version of the Ahsoka novel. But like I said, if you're a hardcore Star Wars fan, definitely worth checking out. Tristan, I've kind of gone on for a while. What are your thoughts on these 6 episodes?
Yeah, you mentioned this is for hardcore Star Wars fans, and I happily count myself among one of them, especially this era specifically. I think Clone Wars is my favorite piece of Star Wars, and I love the prequels. I just love the whole look and the feel and the kind of exaggerated fantasy tone of this whole era of Star Wars. So yeah, I love this, and Ahsoka is one of my favorite characters, so getting some look at her origin and her past, and not just her past, but also her, not just her birth, but her connections to the ending of Episode 3. I don't necessarily want to spoil how the rest of the show goes, because believe it or not, there's more additions to the characters' lore than I thought there'd be. I thought it would just be nice, pleasant little tales with the characters, but you get some cool additions and some little questions answered and things like that I think if you're one of those people who wants to have the little pieces connect, it's definitely going to connect them. You mentioned that the last episode adapts the Ahsoka novel, and I read the Ahsoka novel. I think I prefer the Ahsoka novel, but it's a good adaptation. It still confuses me a bit now that we're like, okay, what's canon though? Because there's 2 different versions of the same events. But who cares about canon at Star Wars? And I definitely recommend watching this if you're a hardcore fan of Ahsoka, especially. But if you are, I'm gonna kind of push back at you a little bit. I think the Dooku and Qui-Gon episodes, I think those could actually work pretty well for people who are not experienced with the Clone Wars. They've seen the prequels and they've seen the movies, but they haven't seen any of the Clone Wars, and they say, give me an idea of what the Clone Wars is. Let me get an idea for what that is. I would show them the Dooku arc here, the handful of episodes here that gives you some insight into Dooku, into Qui-Gon, into Maul, into a lot of the characters that and does it in a short form. And you don't need to have all the context of the Clone Wars, what happens to Dooku later, because you kind of get that from Attack of the Clones.
Yeah, to counter what you said, I more meant the Clone Wars for the Ahsoka episodes. The if you've only seen the movies and you have no interest in watching the Clone Wars, I think easily you can. Or if you've only seen the prequels, you have not watched Clone Wars at all. I think you can easily go through and watch the Dooku episodes and not be lost.
Yeah, and I definitely think Dooku episodes feel to me like a good starting point, to be honest, because I always wonder where do I tell people to start if they've seen the movies and they're like, what? Where do I go next? Do I tell them to start with the Clone Wars movie? I don't really like the movie all that much. Do I say start with season 1 of the Clone Wars? Well, it takes 2.5 seasons to actually get pretty good, but I honestly think this would be a great place to start. Not necessarily the Ahsoka episodes, but I think the Dooku episodes are a really good starting point.
Yeah, that's fair. I agree with that. And to push back a little bit on the positivity, there are a little bit of negatives I have. Like I said, this is for hardcore Star Wars fans, but for me, two of the three Ahsoka episodes kind of left me not walking away, but after the episode, I was kind of like, why? The very first episode, I watched it, and I was just like, okay, like it didn't add anything to the canon, and it doesn't necessarily have to, but it didn't even feel like a compelling story or anything that made me go like, oh, like this definitely. It was fine. I just thought it was okay, and it's like if you have 6 episodes to tell a story about anything you want. I feel like even if they wanted to show an early moment in Ahsoka's life, they could have made it more interesting and more compelling. And then the third episode was just a condensed and slightly changed version of the Ahsoka novel. So again, I'm just left asking why. Like, I know Dave Filoni said in an interview, oh, he wanted to show like what made Ahsoka go back to the fight, but I did. That's in the Ahsoka novel. Like, I just don't need an episode of Tales of the Jedi to tell me that. I would have loved if they had answered something we don't know, like where was Ahsoka during the time of the original trilogy. I don't want to spoil Rebels too much, but I personally feel like in a sort of way she skipped the timeline of the original trilogy. If you've seen Rebels, you probably know what I'm talking about, but some people don't have that mindset, so if they had found a way to more answer that and talk about somewhere between the Rebels-ish timeline and the Mandalorian timeline, tell a story about her there, I felt like would have been more interesting than just doing a version of a story that's already out there.
Yeah, I think the Ahsoka episodes are weaker than the Qui-Gon Maul episodes. I don't necessarily, the Qui-Gon Dooku episodes. I don't necessarily think that they can't adapt the Ahsoka novel because it's not like everybody's out reading the Star Wars novels, especially the YA books, so I don't have a problem with them telling a story that was necessarily told before. And I'll defend a little bit the first episode because I think it connects to the final episode. I don't want to spoil how the final episode goes down beat for beat, but I think the first episode showing her defending her village in this peaceful way, like subduing this threat and not necessarily killing it, but finding this peaceful solution. I think that shows like the youthful Ahsoka. That shows the Ahsoka we get, like the Clone Wars episode 1 Ahsoka. I think that shows like the birth of that character that we know. And I think the final episode, when she confronts a larger, more threatening force that has done a lot of damage to a village as well, we see like she's a changed character now. She's much more willing to strike violence. She's much more willing to push herself beyond the line of what the Jedi necessarily would say are good and evil. And I think that shows an arc for the character, beginning, middle, and end throughout this Tales of the Jedi. Even though they are standalone stories, I feel like we get a complete arc of Ahsoka's kind of birth from not just early Ahsoka, but like the rebirth of who we then see in Rebels.
Yeah, that's fair. I can understand that point. Anything else you have to say about what we saw in Tales of the Jedi?
No, I really liked it. I can't wait. I hope they do more of this stuff because this is exactly what I would love to see from Star Wars. Just little moments here and there. Let's see what Ahsoka is doing during the original trilogy if that's what people want to see. But I also would like to get some other characters outside of Ahsoka. I thought it was cool to see Dooku because we haven't necessarily gotten, especially Qui-Gon, we haven't gotten a lot of Qui-Gon at all. So to be able to see those two characters and an arc that I think is really compelling that isn't explored fully on screen, I think it was a great chance to see that. So I hope for the next episodes we don't follow someone as mainstream as Ahsoka. I'd like to follow somebody that we haven't gotten a chance to explore more because we've gotten so much with Ahsoka. I don't need more Ahsoka right now.
Yeah, so that brings me to my question I was going to ask you. There were two Jedi that were thematically linked. Both of them left the Jedi Order for different reasons. But is there two Jedi that you would like to see in a season together? I have two picks, and I know you're not going to like them based on what you just said. So I'm curious what your two
Well,
thoughts are.
I think I look at the Quinlan Voss and Asajj Ventress, and I think that those they had an arc that was kind of left on the cutting room floor of the Clone Wars. That was adapted into a novel that I really liked, and you don't necessarily have to do that exact arc, but I would love to see something with Quinlan Voss bouncing around. You know, if you don't know him, he was kind of this cowboy like Jedi and Han Solo kind of personality. You know, he's really rebellious and really energetic, and not necessarily almost like a surfer type of energy, not who you would think of as a Jedi. And you don't get a lot of him in the Clone Wars, so I'd like to see, you know, give him a tail, and
Yeah.
he has a tail with Quinlan Voss. I think it'd be interesting to explore.
Yeah. So I mean, you could
I
do
mean,
him.
Asajj Ventress. That'd be an interesting one to explore.
Yes, I mean she was a Jedi Padawan at one point, so you could do both of them together and culminate in something that is similar to the Dark Disciple novel that features both of them. But you could show him after those events. We know he is part of the path, uh, and that we see in the Kenobi series. The two Jedi I want to see, and you're probably going to disagree, but two Jedi that are very similar, and that is Anakin Skywalker and Ben Solo. I feel like, and I would, unlike what they kind of did with Ahsoka, I would focus on the moments we haven't seen. I had pieced in my mind like how I would balance these two episodes or balance these two characters as far as what their story is, and I was like, I don't know if I sent this to you, but I was talking to one of my other friends about it. Basically, first episode is, you know what? I'm just gonna pull it up because that's easier for me than try to remember and stumble over my memories. And
I can give you my thoughts on these characters that you've chosen, though, because
Alright.
I think an Anakin, I think a Ben Solo choice would be great because I love Kylo Ren. He's my favorite Star Wars character, kind of, and I would love to see more with him, and he has an arc, you know, that I'd love to get filled in a little bit. And Anakin, I think you said I wouldn't like that. And I don't necessarily love it, but I think it could be a possible good choice because I think Tales of the Jedi, like you mentioned before, could be a good starting point. And if you can get, you know, a basic arc of Anakin out there and say, okay, here's your Anakin arc, that gives you a basic idea of the character of Anakin, and then you can go to Clone Wars to get a bunch of Anakin. I think that kind of works. But I'd love to hear your pitch on what your story would be
So
if
these
that
are
fits with my caveat.
so these are going to be my two stories that essentially mirror each other. So it's the first episode, episode one, you got young Anakin pre episode one, The Phantom Menace, is showing his prowess in the Force as he grows up, and it's like small things. He's not exactly moving rocks, but maybe he can slightly manipulate people. Like Qui-Gon said, he can see things before they happen. And his mom ultimately being 100% confused about his origin, doesn't know how he came to be born, doesn't know how he was conceived, but at the end of the day, she's still his mom, and she's trying to protect him from the horrors of slavery. She's trying to, when they have to do their job, she's trying to make a game of it. And you can just kind of see like this motherly protection of Shmi Skywalker over Anakin. Episode 2, we have young Ben, who wants to be involved in what his mom and dad are doing. They're fighting the First Order. They're trying to form the New Republic, but they kind of hide him off. They push him away from everything they're doing. They kind of leave him to his own devices. And this is Leia protecting Ben in her own way, but different than what Shmi was doing. They're basically doing everything they can from letting Ben become like Vader. Episode 3 is Anakin's first days at the Jedi Temple. This would be around the time he does the test in front of the Jedi Council where he's seeing what's on the board and like, oh, that's a cup, oh, that's a ship. Where he can't see the board, but he can, like, through the Force know what's on the board. And we see him feel very unwelcome in the cold environment of the Jedi Temple, and Qui-Gon is the only feeling of warmth. He's doing everything he can to prove he belongs, especially after multiple people, including Mace Windu, suggest he should just go back home. In episode 4, Ben is dropped off at Luke's temple by his parents. It's a very warm and welcoming environment. Luke is doing everything he can to make his nephew feel at home, but Ben just wants to go back and be with his mother, who's someone who he feels abandoned by. Then we go to episode 5 and we see Anakin's Jedi trials. Have it be a different version of him fighting Asajj than the Tartakovsky Clone Wars, because in the Tartakovsky Clone Wars, that was his Jedi trials, as he essentially faced Asajj Ventress. And Anakin has finally proven to himself and everyone else he belongs by officially being named a Jedi Knight. Cut to episode 6. Ben learns that his grandfather is Darth Vader, and now he realizes he was right. He does not belong at the Jedi Temple.
I think that is a great connection. I love the connective tissue of those arcs, and yeah, like I mentioned, I think that does fit my Anakin list of here's an arc you can watch that gives you the gist of the Anakin character arc, and then you can go to Clone Wars if you really want to fill it in with all of the details and all of the extra stuff. And I think that works. And I would love to see that with Ben Solo. I need more Ben Solo in my life, Joe. So give me some Ben Solo. Bring in some Snoke. You know, I gotta get some Snoke in there.
Yep.
You know,
yeah, you can
I'd
drop
be down
Snoke
for
in
that.
that 6th episode of Tales of the Jedi. But with that, I believe it kind of wraps up our Disney Plus discussion that I went longer on than I expected, but I loved the 6 episodes, so I'm okay with it. And with that, I believe we're moving on to our last streaming service, and that is that is Hulu, where you watched both American Horror Story and Pose. I'll let you talk about both of those.
Yeah, I didn't do this intentionally, but I wanted my way into watching these two very parallel shows, both from Ryan Murphy, both set in early 80s New York City, following the LGBTQ community and dealing kind of either directly or indirectly with AIDS. And I'll start with American Horror Story because that's kind of the newest entry here. They're only 4 episodes deep. I've seen the first 3, and so far I'm really liking this. It feels way different than all the other American Horror Story seasons do, and I told you that it probably would because he does that a lot with this show. And this is very creative. I think it helps that he's not involved in every episode. You look at the writing list, and he wrote the first episode. He's kind of involved as a producer, but he's not, writing all the time on this. He's kind of handed it off to some younger blood that I think has been helpful for the show here. But the premise is that it's set in early 80s New York, and you follow some people among the LGBT community who are kind of trying to live in hiding on the early days of AIDS. And meanwhile, there's a serial killer, some kind of masked serial killer going around in like a kinky masked suit, killing gay people. And so they try and it follows a investigative reporter for an underground gay newspaper, and he's trying to uncover this serial killer, figure out the murder mystery of who's killing off these people and why the police ignoring it, why is the city ignoring it. And it feels like a metaphor for AIDS. It's this deadly silent killer among the gay community in 80s New York that the cops and the system is kind of ignoring. So that feels like an obvious parallel. And then there's an even more obvious parallel involving Billie Lourd, the daughter of Carrie Fisher. And she is in the show as this scientist who's spouting some very intense theories about a disease that's breaking out among deer on an island near New York. And so there's also this parallel going on about this disease breaking out and killing a bunch of deer, and she believes that the disease may have been manufactured somehow, that it may have come out from a lab. It feels kind of relevant to conversations that are going on, in conspiracy circles, right now. So they're leaning into some of that stuff, and I'm curious to see how it all comes together. They set up these parallel storylines of Billie Lourd's investigative into this disease and also the murderer, and they haven't really connected to me of like plot-wise how do these connect. So I'm curious to see how that plays out. But so far I'm liking this a lot. Zachary Quino is back. Dennis O'Hare is back. You get all kinds of great Zachary Quino returns, or Ryan Murphy returns. So if you're curious about this at all, you're curious about that premise and the investigative horror of it, it's not necessarily leaning into the horror so far. It's much more leaning into the detective story. I think our co-host here, Johnny, would honestly like this a little bit. It reminds me of some of the Giallo films he's been watching recently, where it has that hard-boiled detective mixing in with the brutal horror. So I'm curious to see how it goes, and I would love to see anyone who's watching this what your thoughts are on it so far, especially compared to some of the other seasons, because this feels much lighter on the horror than maybe any of the other seasons so far have.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense. Ryan Murphy's branched out recently into other things, especially on Netflix, and so I could understand why maybe his other work is kind of feeding back into American Horror Story and what could cause it to feel different than some of the previous seasons.
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about one of his other works in a second, but I am looking forward to the rest of American Horror Story, especially when I look at the list of directors, because I mentioned that Billie Lourd is in this as kind of this next generation of actress, but you also have Jennifer Lynch, the daughter of David Lynch. She's going to direct a bunch of the episodes later on in the season, so I'm curious to see what her style is going to be like. Is she going to ape her dad's style? Is she going to find her totally own thing? I'm curious to see how that plays out. But yeah, he talked about Ryan Murphy's other creations, and I happened to be also watching Pose, one of Ryan Murphy's other creations. It came out a few years earlier than this, but it's also set in the early '80s in New York, and it follows specifically the ballroom and drag culture in New York at the time. And if you know drag now, it's so popular after RuPaul's Drag Race and a lot of those live shows and things like that. But back in the '80s, it was underground. You know, you couldn't really do it on the public. You'd be arrested for indecency and all that stuff. So it follows kind of the underground drag movement of the early '80s New York, while also dealing with AIDS directly this time. You know, it's characters are diagnosed with it. People are dealing with their boyfriends dying from it, and it's very much part of the narrative here. And it's emotional, it's funny, it's has a bit of that Ryan Murphy camp to it, especially when you get into the performances, and the ballroom performances are really, really fun. The costumes are all so gorgeous and cool. So I'm having a great time with this, especially as someone who, like I mentioned in the Dragula conversation, I don't know anything about drag. And you follow, there's a character here played by Evan Peters who's very much like this noob into the drag community who works at Trump Tower, and now he's kind of trying to figure out what is this drag life like, what are these ballrooms like, and you follow that character around. But I think you also get Kate Mara. I haven't seen her in a while. She was also a great Ryan Murphy staple. James Vanderbeek is in this. He's really good in this as well. But I think the standout here is Billy Porter. He plays uh, kind of his name in here is Pray Tell. He's kind of like the MC, the host of these ballrooms. So he's very, very high energy. He's always on the mic, roasting people or hyping people up, or like announcing the themes and, you know, announcing the players and the performers. Really, really fun performance. He won an Emmy for this. He won some Golden Globes for this. He's the outstanding performer here in the cast. So I highly recommend this if you want to see something. We mentioned Ryan Murphy's specific tone. This is not in his tone at all. This is very serious. It has moments of Ryan Murphy goofiness and fun, but this is a drama, and it's very dramatic and very heartfelt. And I'm liking this a lot. If you're a fan of Ryan Murphy's more serious stuff like American Crime Story, this is along that line. This is way, way better than I thought it was going to be, and I highly recommend it. It's all on Hulu, so check it out.
All right, yeah, it definitely sounds interesting. I might check it out. Anything else you have to say before we move on to our MVP and then eventually move on to our November top 10 preview?
No, I'm curious to see the MVP, but yeah, it was fun to do this duology of Ryan Murphy. You know, he's taken over the streaming world, whether it's on Netflix or it's on Hulu. I seem like I can't escape him.
All right, and so looks like with that we are moving on for our MVP of the week. I don't know if you have your nomination, but I have mine. And I will just go ahead and say my MVP nomination for the week of November 1st is the Count of Sereno, Count Dooku himself. I felt like going into Tales of the Jedi, if you were to ask me name your top 50 Star Wars characters, Count Dooku wouldn't make the list. And now if I were to do a top 10, I feel like there's a decent chance he makes the list. I felt like just in the small amount that we got from him, it added so much to his character. I understand his motivations more for leaving the Jedi, turning to the dark side, and I think it could also add more when I go back and watch the prequels again to Christopher Lee's performance. So with that, for me, my nomination is Count Dooku.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a strong nomination there. I'm gonna say my nomination, and then we can argue it out for a second, but I'm going with Guillermo del Toro. I think he was so personal and hands-on with this show, Cabinet of Curiosities. I think it was really cool to see him involved in that. You compare it to something like Jordan Peele's Twilight Zone, where he wasn't necessarily involved in the storytelling, the production side of that. He was just kind of part of the cast in a way. And I think this feels like Guillermo del Toro's very personal creation. He's very hands-on with it. And he also premiered Pinocchio this week. I know that doesn't necessarily count because it's not on Netflix just yet, but it will be soon. So I'm going with Del Toro. He's heartfelt, lovely guy. He seems like everyone loves him on social media. You know, all the filmmakers are hyping him up, saying, "Go watch Cabinet of Curiosities. We love Del Toro." You know what? So I got to give Del Toro my MVP vote. That's my choice here. Del Toro is who I'm nominating.
All right. So in past, I've relented because I'm like, ooh, that's a good option. Even last week, I think I chose King Viserys, and you chose Matt Smith, and I chose Patty Constantine, and you chose Matt Smith, and I relented because I think Matt Smith. But for me, as far as I mean, granted, I understand on Twitter I follow a lot of Star Wars people more than just your general movie fans. But I think online, I didn't even realize that Cabinet of Curiosities had come out yet. And my Twitter for the last week has been flooded with Tales of the Jedi conversation with Count Dooku. I've seen, various things I've listened to. People are like, oh, I completely understand Count Dooku now. Completely changes my thoughts on Count Dooku. I think Count Dooku was driving the conversation positively a lot more than Guillermo del Toro was. And so I'm gonna say pretty strong on Count Dooku this week.
Yeah, like, I think I can value you down there, Joe. He had great arc this week, and I love Count Dooku. I love Qui-Gon. So you know what? He was a standout of Tales of the Jedi. So I'm gonna go ahead and give you this one this week, Joe. I
All
love Del
right.
Toro is gonna be up in the bat getting you. You know he's coming.
All
He's
right.
getting his
Hey,
revenge on you one day.
maybe when Pinocchio drops on Netflix, you and I are like all about Pinocchio, and we say, hey, Guillermo del Toro, MVP of the week. But for this week, the week of November 1st, our MVP of the week is Count Dooku from Tales of the Jedi. And with that, we move on to our November top 10. Oh, one of the other topics we have is kind of the streaming services. What was your top streaming service for the month of October? We kind of talked beforehand. It's very clearly between two because throughout the week or throughout the month after we went off air, we would rank the streaming services 1 through 3, gold, silver, and bronze. And pretty much we had these same two streaming services in gold and silver. Both of them were running great shows throughout the month of October, and I think that definitely aided them. But I think I have my vote locked in for best streaming service of the month of October, but I will let you go first.
Yeah, I had my vote locked in until we got to this week, and I'll tell you why. Because yeah, we mentioned that House of the Dragon was killing it on HBO Max, and even beyond that, I just love watching movies on HBO Max. I use it more than any other streaming platform, so it gets a bit of a leg up for me in that because I just use it so much. But then Disney Plus came along, last round came in for a big swing, not just dropping Tales of the Jedi, which we both were really, really into, still going out with Andor and getting better and better and better by the week, I feel, with Andor. But then to end the month with this big Doctor Who news that feels so personal to me, but also so grand to the platform. It feels like it's what I want, but it's also going to be really, really big for Disney Plus. So for me, I'm giving Disney Plus the win for October here.
Yeah, I agree with you. We talked before, I don't really care about Doctor Who and Andor. We decided instead of doing a weekly talk of Andor, we'll just talk at the end of each arc. So I believe in 2 weeks, because next week is we have tonight's episode and then next. So yeah, in about 2 weeks we'll talk about Andor and that arc. But if I were to rank the shows and the things that came out in the month of October, House of the Dragon would be 1. And then Andor, Tales of the Jedi would be 2 and 3. And honestly, the shock of how good Hocus Pocus is might put it in like 6 or 7. So I believe when you have that many top spots, and I don't really know what HBO Max had that was that great besides House of the Dragon this month. So for me as well, Disney Plus gets October. I think they had by far and away the best month.
Yeah, they did a great job. And we're critical of a lot of their Star Wars stuff, so the fact that they're now killing it with this one, I think, is helping me like the platform this month a lot.
Yeah, so shockingly, Disney Plus wins October. In the month of scary and spooky, the family-friendly service wins the month.
Look, I could have given it to Shudder if I wanted to be specific. I could have argued that argument.
Yeah, I could have understood that argument, but we locked it in. Disney Plus wins October, and with that, we now move on to our November top 10. And so basically, how we curate this list is Tristan and I go our separate ways. And I just realized I didn't put our honorable mentions as a thing I could put on screen, but that's fine. I only wasted 30 seconds making the graphic. So Tristan and I go our separate ways. He makes his top 10, I make my top 10, and then I go and combine it. So if it gets number 1 on my list, it gets 11 points. If it's number 2 on a list, it gets 9. Then 3 is 8, 4 is 7, 5 is 6, 6 is on and on down to 10th place is 1 point. So really it's just inverse. However, being number 1 gets you 11 points. And let me pull up our combined list really quickly. Tristan, how hard was it to combine your list? I'll let you talk real quick while I
It
find it.
was a bit difficult because it was a lighter week in terms of, or lighter month in terms of new releases, but I did feel like there was a good amount of catalog movies being added to platforms. So it was fun to comb through that and find the ones that I'm actually going to be watching that are dropping on HBO and other places. So yeah, that was a fun dig, but it was not necessarily as fun to look for newer stuff because I felt like the newer stuff was either not there or not looking great. So I'm curious to see how our list came together and talk through the top 10 because I'm really excited for some of the backlog stuff, but not as excited for some of the headlining stuff. I know we're gonna get into Guardians of the Galaxy as one of our
Yeah,
honorable
that's the
mentions, and that didn't make either one of our lists because it looks fine, it looks okay, it looks sometimes. I'm not sure if it's even gonna be all that good. I'm more excited for it than I was before Werewolf by Night because that kind of made me think more of these Disney Plus specials, and maybe it's going to be something a bit more interesting. But I'm not necessarily super excited for it. If it blows me away, I'll be excited, but I'm not counting down the days for this one. I'm waiting for Guardians 3 at that still, Give me the real movie.
yeah. Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special. It's directed by James Gunn. It's going to be dropping on Disney Plus November 25th, and ultimately it looks like the Guardians crew realizes that Star Lord's feeling a little down, and so they go to Earth to try to find him a Christmas present. So it could be one of those things where honestly it's sweet and heartwarming and nice, but I don't expect it to be mind blowing.
I'm
And
curious to see how it connects because I have to imagine the post-credit scene is going to give us some Guardians 3 connections, and I think they're telling us that this is the finale of the current phase of Marvel. So it could be interesting to see if they do any kind of stuff towards the end to set up what might be next for the Marvel phases.
yeah. And next on our honorable mentions, we have Cyrano, which was on your list. And basically, it looks like a kind of remake, retelling of the classic story, Cyrano de Bergerac. And it's going to be dropping on Amazon Prime November 23rd. This movie was in theaters, but it stars Peter Dinklage. So instead of the story of him having a classically, or insanely long nose, he's just Peter Dinklage. He's a dwarf. So I haven't seen the movie. I don't know if you've seen it. I feel like it's just a much more realistic story than
I
the
love this. I've seen this. I thought it was great. It was realistic, definitely in the character connections and the character relationships. I thought were an improvement over the various versions of this that I've seen done otherwise. I know Steve Martin did an adaptation called uh, Roxanne, where he had a really comically long nose, and this is more in the realism category because it's set in a period piece, and it kind of makes sense that he'd be more ostracized even back then as a dwarf than he would be even now, which would still be difficult. And I felt that was very empathizing and really helped elevate the character. Peter Dinklage was great as the lead, so I think he should have gotten an Oscar nomination out of it, to be honest. And I understand if you're not necessarily a musical person that you might not be into this because it has big kind of campy kind of moments and things like that. But the music is really, really unique. If you know the band The National, they have this really light, airy kind of sound, not at all what you think of as musical numbers. It's not showy, it's not Broadway, it's not big dancing and anything like that. It's very light touch. It almost is like whispered music. It's really interesting the way the music sounds in this, and it has big bombastic moments, but a lot of it is really quiet and subtle. And I thought it was really a fascinating way to tell a musical and to take a story that we all know and is pretty. Even if you don't know Sereno, you know like the beats of it because you've seen it done in other movies all the time. It's so many rom-coms are just kind of like taking this beat and doing it differently. So if you want to see a classic tale done with really elaborate costumes, the same director of Pride and Prejudice from 2005, so it has that kind of like angst to it too. I had a great time with this, and if you had a girlfriend, might be a good girlfriend watch. So I think you could get some girlfriend joy out of this one.
All right, and with that, to speed things along for our honorable mentions, another one that was on my list was Hard Knocks, the in-season story of the Arizona Cardinals. So if you watched the Detroit Lions Hard Knocks, where that was kind of the preseason training camp, this is kind of the inverse of that, where it's the kind of, I think, final 9 games of the regular season. It's going to be following the Arizona Cardinals, and that's debuting on HBO Max on November 9th, and it's going to be kind of a live follow along with the Arizona Cardinals, who were just okay this season. I feel like they're partially regretting picking the Arizona Cardinals. It could be an entertaining season, but they're just whatever. So I don't know if anyone's really going to care to watch their season. Even when they picked the Arizona Cardinals, I don't know if people were hyped. But I still love a good sports documentary, and so I'm intrigued to watch that. And you also picked on your list the Harry Potter collection is coming to HBO, and
Yeah, I didn't necessarily need to talk about this too much, but I felt like it was a good plug. You know, it's one of those franchises I feel like people are always looking for, trying to figure out where it's going to be at. And for a while it was on Peacock, and now it makes sense it's on HBO Max. I feel like that's where it's going to be for a while, if unless some kind of other contract comes up. But yeah, it makes sense. Warner Brothers movie, put it on the Warner Brothers streaming platform. So if you want to watch Harry Potter, it's all on there, baby.
all right. And next on our honorable mentions list, we have Disenchanted coming to Disney. It's a Disney Plus original movie coming November 18th, a sequel to Enchanted, the kind of Amy Adams breakout movie from the 2000s. So curious to see how that goes. The trailer looks, honestly, the trailer got me intrigued, but then Tristan was saying there were some reactions that and reviews from people that saw it that maybe it's not so great. It makes sense if it was dropped on Disney Plus. Maybe it was originally thought of as potentially a theatrically released, but if the reactions weren't great, I can understand maybe they're like, let's just put this on Disney Plus.
Yeah, one of my toxic traits as a movie fan, Joe, is that I like to follow test screenings and see what's testing and if it's testing good or bad. And that one was not testing great, you know, and that doesn't mean Disney can't go back and reshoot the stuff. That doesn't mean that it wasn't just a bad test audience. I've seen movies that tested bad and then were all great movies, you know, so it could just be a fluke of the testing platform. But yeah, I'm curious to see it because I do like Enchanted, and I love the performances of Enchanted, and I love a musical. So, you know, it seems like on paper something that I would be so into, but it just doesn't seem like there's a lot of hype around one, and also that I just not been hearing great things about it outside of that. So yeah, I'm curious to see it, but I'm not who's super hyped for it. No.
All right, now our next honorable mention, we have Raging Bull. That was on your list, coming to HBO Max for me. I own it on DVD. It's on a streaming service. It doesn't change my life. I can watch it whenever I want. So, classic movie. If you have not seen Raging Bull, definitely check it out. Look for it on HBO Max this month. One of the greatest biopics of all time. Came out in 1980, starring Robert De Niro, directed by Martin Scorsese with Joe Pesci in a supporting role.
Yeah, I haven't seen it myself, actually. I've seen a bunch of parts of it. I studied it in school, so I've seen a lot of it, but I have not sat and watched it, like, front to back, watched this movie. And it is on the Criterion Collection, and I mentioned that it's Criterion Month, so I'm going to use that as an excuse to finally check out Raging Bull. I do have the Blu-ray, the 4K here from Criterion, but it's on HBO Max if you haven't seen it.
All right, and our next... our last honorable mention is Say Hey Willie Mays, documentary about legendary baseball player Willie Mays. I'm not a big baseball fan, but I always love a good sports documentary, and HBO Max seems to be doing a great job with their sports documentary. So that's coming to HBO Max November 8th. So if you like baseball, if you like sports documentaries, look for that on HBO Max November 8th. And that finally brings us to our actual top 10 list. And coming in at number 10, we have Willow, a sequel series to the 80s movie directed by Ron Howard, coming to Disney Plus, and that is dropping on a date I do not remember. November 30th.
I wrote it down. Yeah,
November 30th. Bringing back the Warwick Davis as Willow, kind of leading a new group of characters. I'll be honest, I've not seen the original movie. I don't believe you've seen the original movie, but just the trailer and everything around it and the hype and the nostalgia love people have for the original movie makes me curious and interested to watch it. I'm definitely interested in watching the original Willow before this comes out.
Yeah, I was slightly impressed by the trailer for this, and we're past the fantasy peak of Lord of the Rings and House of the Dragon, so I think maybe it could be time for Willow to come in and give us a nice little pleasant adventure. I'm curious to see how much budget Disney puts behind it, though, because I think that's going to be the kicker. You know, if they can make it look good, this could be a big hit. If it looks just okay, you know, it'll be a hit among the fans of Willow, but it's not going to be like a big cultural mover hit.
Yeah. And then next up on our list at number 9, we have Fruitvale Station. That's coming to Hulu, Amazon Prime, HBO Max, and Netflix November 10th. They really want people to see this. So if you're watching our show and you don't have access to see Fruitvale Station, why are you watching our show? It's on pretty much every streaming service except Disney Plus. And it's kind of where Ryan Coogler, who directed Black Panther 2, Wakanda Forever. He directed Black Panther. He directed the first Creed. This is kind of the thing he got to start. Basically, he was at a film festival and he saw Sylvester Stallone and he was like, hey, I have an idea for a Rocky spinoff about one of Apollo Creed's son. And Sylvester Stallone was basically like, yeah, I really don't have any desire to go back to Rocky. And then he saw Ryan Coogler on stage, basically introducing his next film, Fruitvale Station. Sylvester Stallone loved the movie, walked up to Ryan Coogler, and was very interested in to see what he had to say about a Rocky spinoff. So, without this movie, we do not have Creed, and Creed is one of my favorite movies. So,
I really like this movie too. It's really powerful, really moving. If you don't know the plot, it follows Oscar Grant, who is a young black man who was killed in a shooting, and involving an officer. So it follows his final day. Over he was killed on New Year's Eve, so it follows like he's waking up on New Year's Eve and meeting up with his girlfriend and kind of the final moments of his life leading up to this ultimate confrontation. And I thought it was very moving. Great performance from Michael B. Jordan as a lead. Great performance from Octavia Spencer as his mother. And what I liked about it too is it doesn't necessarily make him out to be a golden hero. I think a lot of the more cheesier takes on a story like this would make him out to be this perfect straight A student who avoided all his problems, and then all of a sudden this big bad officer came along and killed him. And this has some complexity to his life. It has a little, he does make some choices that you wouldn't want him to make, and puts himself in situations you wouldn't want him to be put into. But does that justify any of the action at the end? I don't think so, no. So I really like this a lot. Great drama. And yeah, like Joe said, it's going to be on everything. And it drops on the day that Black Panther 2 comes out. So if you finish Black Panther 2 or you're about to go watch it and you want to see where Ryan Coogler got his start with Michael B. Jordan in the lead, check it out. Great drama. I love it so much. It's really, really powerful stuff. I'm going to watch it again for sure when it's on streaming.
all right. Speaking of powerful, important, dramatic movies, next up on our list at number 8 is The Santa Clauses, a sequel series to the Santa Claus trilogy starring Tim Allen. I'm going to be honest, this was not on Tristan's list. This is only on my list, and this is only on my list purely for nostalgia. Do I think this show will be good? No. Do I think there's a chance it could ruin the Santa Claus trilogy? Yes. Is the third movie in the Santa Claus trilogy bad anyways? Yes. But I love the first Santa Claus so much. The second one is okay. Basically, the plot is Tim Allen, Santa Claus, wants to retire. I think it's very clear and obvious based on the fact that Cal Penn is the only person promoting this movie or this show, because at work we watch a lot of those daytime interview talk shows, and Cal Penn's the only one I see talking about it. So Cal Penn's going to be the next Santa Claus in this franchise. Whether they make a Santa Claus show with Cal Penn or a Santa Claus movie with Cal Penn, I have no idea. But spoiler alert, Cal Penn's going to be the next Santa Claus. Or Tim Allen's not going to retire. But
yeah, this one for me was on my list partially because I totally forgot that it was existing and coming out, and I think that show is part of my lack of anticipation for it. But that being said, I'm gonna watch this all like probably in one go. It's gonna be so nostalgic, and I hope it's terrible. This is one of those moments where I'm like, make it as worse as you can make it. Give me a bunch of terrible cameos, a bunch of really bad lines about like millennials being on their phones. TikTok, make Santa do a TikTok dance. That's what I'm here for.
Yeah, so I believe it's 6 episodes total. The first 2 episodes are dropping November 16th. So get ready for that to come out. And number 7, speaking of Stallone is making his first ever television. I believe he's probably been in an episode of television, but this is his first ever like television series that he's been in, and as the lead or a supporting role in multiple episodes, and that is Tulsa King, coming from Ty Sheridan, or creator or the writer-director of
Hell or High Water?
Well, writer of Hell or High Water, writer of Sicario, creator of the Every Time I Have a Thought It Goes Away, the Yellowstone, creator of Yellowstone, creator of 1883, writer-director of Wind River. And so basically the plot of this show is Sylvester Stallone was this big-time mob boss in it's modern times. He goes to prison and ultimately gets sent to Tulsa, Oklahoma to kind of, I'm not sure, I haven't really garnered from the trailer if he's supposed to set up a new branch of the crime family or if he's just banished from the crime family and he's just decided to set up his own thing in Tulsa, Oklahoma. But the creator has just been crushing it, in my opinion, for the last almost decade at this point. And that drops on Paramount Plus on November 13th, so I'm very excited to see it. I love Stallone. I love Ty Sheridan, so Taylor Sheridan. I don't know. There's too many
It's Tyler
Sheridans.
Sheridan. I think
Tyler
it's
Sheridan.
Taylor Sheridan. Ty Sheridan is an actor from X-Men.
Yep, Ty Sheridan is the young, early 20s actor. Taylor Sheridan is the writer director.
Yes. Yeah, I'm interested to see this. You know, I'll get a review and see how it is. I mean, I'm gonna check out maybe the first episode. It's on Paramount Plus, so I'll give it a watch. I gotta make use of my Paramount Plus subscription. Stallone was in This Is Us for a couple episodes, and a very, very, very cheesy cameo as himself,
Yeah.
which was pretty enjoyable.
Yeah,
But
This Is Us
yeah,
was great for the first like 2 seasons, and then it fell apart and became whatever.
Tyler Sheridan is what makes me kind of excited for this. You know, his stamp as a writer and director is really great. So I think he'll bring a lot to this. And Terrence Winter is involved in it too. He's worked with Scorsese. He wrote Wolf of Wall Street. He worked on Vinyl. He's one of Scorsese's kind of collaborators in film. So I think it'll be an interesting combination to see how they work together.
Yeah, and with that, we move on to number 6, which is Don't Worry, Darling, a show, or a movie rather, that got a lot of attention, not for the quality of the movie, but for all of the behind-the-scenes drama. And I had it on my list mainly because I didn't see it in theaters. It was in theaters. I doubt it's very good, but at this point, I've just seen so much about it that I want to know what's going on, and that's coming to HBO Max this month.
Yeah, I've heard a lot about it. I ended up watching it in theaters only a couple of days ago, and I liked it. I'll give it a positive review. It had a lot of press around the drama more so than the movie. So if you only heard about the drama and missed the movie, I think it's worth a watch. I think it despite all of the drama, I thought it was pretty good. I thought it was all right. You know, I thought especially Florence Pugh as a lead, I thought she was great. So if you want to see a great performance from her and some actually really stylish, cool direction from Olivia Wilde, I think the biggest problem is that it's a lot of style over substance. And if you're looking to get a lot of meaning out of all the individual cool things, it's not going to add up to a lot of great whole singular meaning, you know. But it is cool, and it is a cool drama with some great twists and a fun time.
All right, and so that's dropping on HBO Max on November 7th. And that brings us to our top 5. And number 5 on our list is something that was on my list, very high on my list, and not on Tristan's list at all. And that is Elton John Live Farewell from Dodger Stadium, and that's dropping on Disney Plus November 20th. That's just going to be a live concert film. Elton John, one of my favorite singers, musicians of all time. I was actually hoping to get tickets for when he was in Atlanta, but they were $300 a piece, and I'm like, I love Elton John, but not that much. So I'm happy that I'll be able to see his concert free from the comfort of my own home.
Yeah, I'm going to watch this too. It wasn't on my list, but it was on my radar, you know. It's because I'm going to watch it for sure. I love Elton John. I almost bought tickets to his Wrigley Field show. I believe it was here. So I'm going to be watching this for sure. Give me a chance to finally get an Elton John concert, and even though I'm watching it on streaming.
Yeah, and that brings us to our number 4, which is Nope, the movie from, Nope. I believe, last year? Or no, earlier this year. Earlier this year. Is dropping on Peacock on November 18th. Jordan Peele. Movie, if you like his other work, if you liked Us, if you liked Get Out, definitely check out Nope.
Yeah, I'm curious because this was very divisive. A lot of people had strong opinions on it, more so than the other two. I saw a lot of, divided takes. So if you want to make your opinion on this, I definitely think you're going to have an opinion strongly one way or the other way. And it's unlike his films in a lot of other ways, but tonally it's very similar. It follows a couple of horse wranglers, a brother and a sister who work as horse wranglers, and they start to think that maybe they see a flying object, mysterious craft above their farm at night, and they take it upon themselves to investigate this and get it on film. So if that sounds like a cool, fun journey for you, Stephen Yeun is also in it from Walking Dead fame as kind of this goofy runner of an amusement park nearby, like this Western hokey kind of world nearby that he runs, and you follow his kind of character arc too throughout this. So yeah, I like this a lot, and yeah, really interesting, thematically really interesting too. So I would love to hear what you guys thought of this. If you saw it in the theaters or if you finally check it out on Peacock, I would love to hear you guys' thoughts on this.
Yeah, Nope. I believe it's probably, in my opinion, the weakest of Jordan Peele's 3 films. But if he does the rest of his filmography and that remains the weakest of all of his films, then he's clearly top 5 director of all time, because it's still a very good movie. It's just not as good as the other two. And with that, we go to our number 5, and that is the television series Blockbuster on Netflix, which is just maybe the biggest flex I have ever seen from from a streaming service. It's a workplace comedy from the creators of Brooklyn Nine-Nine and Superstore. I will say Brooklyn Nine-Nine gets a lot of hype. People talk about that. My girlfriend and I are currently making our way through Superstore on Hulu right now. Great workplace comedy. If you are looking for a new sitcom or show to watch and you just like a good, fun, easy show, definitely check out Superstore on Hulu. But Blockbuster is a show, a fictional version workplace comedy of the last blockbuster in America. The fact that it's coming out on Netflix is just, I think, adds a certain
Brutal.
level of comedy. It stars Randall Park, and it comes out November 3rd.
Yeah, I'm curious about this one. I'm curious if it's just going to be very annoying, like pop culture humor, and Randall Park can sometimes be somewhat annoying. Uh, so I'm curious if this is going to be bad. uh, but I think the fact that it's on Netflix is very intriguing, and I wonder how much they're going to get into the actual downfall of the company. And there's a lot of really like interesting stuff that happened at Netflix or happened at Blockbuster behind the scenes. It seems people love to say, "Oh, Netflix came out and then Blockbuster died," but it was a lot more complex and crazy than that. But this seems like it's going to be much more about the workplace zaniness, more of a Clerks thing than like a Succession type of thing, you know. So I think it's gonna be fun, but I would have liked a bit more of telling me the actual downfall of Blockbuster more so than a goofy comedy set at a Blockbuster. I think that would be more interesting.
Yeah, this is one of those shows that I feel like could either be a great, like, fun sitcom workplace comedy, or it's just going to be straight garbage because it's just going to feel like Netflix is making fun of Blockbuster rather than
Yeah,
like,
this could very easily feel dirty and like gross, you know,
yeah,
because people love Blockbuster, especially now they're getting nostalgic for it, you know. And if Netflix comes in and starts saying how idiotic we are for liking Blockbuster, it's gonna feel like a bit cold, man. Come on.
yeah. And with that, I keep saying and with that, I need a new transition. Sorry.
And then
So
and
we are now
onward.
moving on to our number two, and I almost said it again. It's Welcome to Chippendales, a Hulu comedy drama series starring Camille Nanjiani about the very true story of the creation of Chippendales, which I'm going to be honest, my only correlation, only awareness of Chippendales is the Chris Farley, Patrick Swayze SNL sketch. I really know nothing about Chippendales outside of that sketch. I feel like it's a very much a late 80s, early 90s establishment.
Yeah, I'm curious about it because of that. You know, it's a really big pop culture thing that I know the aesthetic of, but but I don't know much about it. So I'm curious to see how true this actually is and how much they get into the fiction of it. And yeah, I mentioned the block. This is almost what I would have liked them to do with Blockbuster more so than what they're doing. You know, this is going to be interesting. It was way higher on your list than it was on mine because I just don't know. I don't know. I see the trailer for this and I don't necessarily know how to feel about it yet. You know, is this going to be just another annoying Hulu? Not annoying, but it's going to be one of those. Well, it's annoying the fact that they sometimes drag these things out to be miniseries when they should have been movies. That's some of my hesitancy going into this is, does this need to be a whole show, or is it going to feel like a movie plot that they knew wouldn't make money, so they had to turn it into a TV show plot? And sometimes that can be annoying, you know, to me. But I'm looking forward to seeing it. I like Camille Nanjiani as an actor, so I hope that he can really bring it this performance. And it could be getting some Emmys. You know, it would be next year at this point. But yeah, I think it could be a good hit for Hulu. Hulu needs some hits, and I hope this is one.
All right. And now we have a show or a project. I don't want to reveal too much. If you've followed our podcast, you maybe will tell what number one is if you've been following what's coming out in November and what we've talked about. Something that I knew was going to be number one on my list. Something before I even started writing down my top 10, I'm like, this is locked in at number one. Something I was even surprised was on Tristan's list at all because he hasn't watched the project that made it the number one on my list. And so when I saw it was his number one, I was completely shocked. And that is Wednesday, a television series about Wednesday Addams coming to Netflix on November 23rd. Tristan, you have not seen Addams Family or Family Values. So what made you put this as your number one?
Well, yeah, I haven't seen the movies Adams Family Values, but I have seen the original Adams Family TV show. I watched it on the Meet TV classic reruns. Great time. And I love Jenna Ortega. I think she's having a really great year this year in particular, especially in horror. She's had a bunch of horror already this year, and this seems like it's going to be in the horror vein at least. So I'm curious to see it, and I think Tim Burton being on this is what really makes me excited for it. I think Tim Burton and Addams Family just goes so well together, so well that people sometimes assume that he did the first Addams Family movie, and he didn't. So I can't wait to see his touch on this. He's been in a mixed, to say the least, a mixed time in his career right now. So I'm hoping that this can bring him back a bit. And I'm really excited to see him and Jenna Ortega. I think she'll have a fun. She can bring some camp to her. You know, she has that dead stare. I think it would be really, really fun with Tim Burton's direction. I can't wait to see how this comes together. And I'm gonna watch those movies uh, before this comes out. If you haven't seen them, they're both for free right now on Tubi. And the animated ones that came out a couple of years recently are, I believe, on Prime right now. So you can fill yourself in on your Adams Family to prep for Wednesday. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it, and I'm also looking forward to watching the rest of it too.
Yeah, so it looks like a solid cast. We got Luis Guzman as Gomez Adams, Fred Armisen as Uncle Fester, and we even have Christina Ricci having a role, according to the last trailer. And so I'm very curious to see how this pans out. I'm very much looking forward to it. Big fan of, like I said, Adams Family and Adams Family values, and definitely feels like it's following that aesthetic. And it's going to focus on Wednesday at Nevermore Academy, kind of a little bit older than what we've seen her before in the original series and in the 90s movies. So definitely looking forward to it. I think that pretty much wraps up our show for the week. Tristan, any final thoughts?
No, really looking forward to this month, and though we have a lot to look forward to. I'm looking forward to Wednesday, especially. I'm can't wait to do some binging of that, and yeah, great month this month. So I'm happy. I'm sad to be gone from the horror month, but I'm happy to be going into a good month ahead.
All right, same. And I think that wraps up our show. And without further ado, goodbye. Hey, thank you for watching the Movie Change Up podcast. We'd really appreciate if you liked, commented, subscribed, and shared us with anyone you think might be into what we're doing over here. Thank you. Have a nice day.